I would like, in the very few minutes, to focus on European military capabilities, because it's my job now that you very nicely described, and the defense industry, as you said, needed to support them through the optic of transatlantic relations. And of course, I will be happy to field broader questions in the discussion session if you wish so. Of course, this is a very critical moment for Europe. Defense departments are facing a perfect storm of declining budgets, an increasingly unsustainable world, a shift in US focus, and a defense industrial base that is under severe pressure. The shift in US focus is understandable. I would even dare say that it is a positive mood. I would say that for two reasons. Firstly, it is a manifestation of US confidence in Europe's ability to deal with its own security and defense. And to quote from your strategic guidance, US strategic guidance, most European countries are now producers of security rather than consumers of it. The corollary of this, and this is the second reason, is that it signals the beginning of the end of the European overdependency on the United States. For too long, European nations, I've seen with a very few exceptions, have been content to depend on the security provided by the United States. And I think, to be fair, that you were in the United States content to provide it. I would argue that this culture of dependency led, at least in part, to what one might call the kind of benign neglect of defense capabilities in Europe. So the shift of US policy will probably force Europe to stand on its own feet, 2 feet, and to walk the walk and not just to talk the talk. Europe is at, of course, very important crossroad. Firstly, there is a risk of degrading our strategic, industrial, and technical abilities. The operation in Libya revealed once again that even though the Europeans did well, you said it, and although they structurally spent a respectable amount on defense, there in Libya critical capabilities gaps persist, and you had to do it for 80% of these enablers. There is, of course, an additional risk that because of the squeeze of their defense budgets, governments will be tempted to make further cuts in capabilities. And I very much agree with what has been said. We should not take as assumption that we have to do more with less. We should not accept the notion of less, but we have certainly to work on the more. Second, it is certainly a risk, but undoubtedly also an opportunity. And I think it's also the way that you Americans look at things, saying never waste a crisis or never waste a good crisis. Though it is an opportunity for Europe to work efficiently together, an opportunity for European nations to acquire collectively what is out of reach individually, and not only to acquire, but to support together, to train together, and to have modalities of employing these capabilities together. Then we face as Europeans a stark choice: either cooperate to acquire capabilities or risk losing those capabilities altogether. And even as was said today, not knowing exactly what kind of capabilities we would lose. And that's why cooperation is not simply an option, but clearly a necessity. And I think that we need in Europe to address 3 challenges. Firstly, investment, including and in particular research and technology. The trend is a decreasing trend, and it could have a very strong impact on innovation, development of key technologies, competitiveness, jobs. Secondly, a market in Europe that should be less fragmented, and an industrial base which should be able to support this effort, and also to support the political will behind the increase and the effort on capabilities. Thirdly, the shift from investment in static forces, as has been said today, to expeditionary capabilities and the possibility to deploy. Then we are dealing with these challenges in the European Union, in particular through the European Defence Agency. We are dealing with them in close cooperation with NATO. well, you said what I said yesterday, a single set of forces, and we quite rightly want to and have to avoid any duplication. Then we focus, as Amiral Pottinger said, on pragmatic cooperation on both sides, on output rather than on institutional beauty contest. And after all, EDAs works on pooling and sharing, ACT and NATO work on smart defense, and it's clearly the two sides of the same coin. Then more Europe is good for NATO, and I have the feeling that it has been said regularly since this morning, and particularly this morning. What is encouraging is the strong US support to our efforts. The old dogma, first time I put my feet in the Pentagon in a European capacity, has everything through NATO. I have really the feeling that this dogma has gone. Instead, the US, it's our impression in the European Union approach, is really to support European efforts, irrespective of where they are undertaken. A good example is air-to-air refueling. We have here a European shortfall, and we try to bring a European solution. And we do it not only in close dialogue with the United States, but clearly benefiting from your support and advice to develop this European response to a European shortfall. That said, it seems to be clear that the US will no longer underwrite European security. So Europe has to demonstrate that it can increase its own capability to act. But this makes it all the more important that we develop sound and balanced cooperation. Is it the Damocles sword? No. Then a good cooperation across the Atlantic. In the 21st century, the Transatlantic Partnership cannot be measured only by the number of troops, American troops, deployed in Europe. It's interesting to discuss what would be the effect. We did it yesterday. But it cannot be the only parameter. Or it cannot be measured either by the defense equipment that the Europeans would buy from American companies. It has to be developed in the context of a genuine and equitable two-way street. We need to work together to secure shared interests and to build and deploy capabilities. And this also includes the abilities of our militaries to deploy, to defend the interests we all share as what I think is the most like-minded group of nations in history. And we need to be pragmatic, output-oriented, I already said it, to cooperate when it maximizes the potential benefits. I would give an example. If we want to pool smart munitions, and it's one of the lessons of Libya, well, it would be easier if the ITAR regulation could be eased, and it's something that we have to discuss. Also, when we face joint challenges, for instance, air traffic management, airworthiness, including on next-gen on one side and single European sky on the other side. That is what I think we have to keep in mind when identifying the areas for future cooperation, and I look very much forward to the debate we will have on that, and do so in the context of the worst economic crisis in decades. That is why I think that the recent initiative to jumpstart the Transatlantic Partnership for Jobs and Growth and the establishment of the EU-US Summit by the US Summit in last November, of the high-level working group on jobs and growth is globally important for the success and cooperation, and perhaps there are some aspects of this dialogue can have an impact and a positive impact. And we should perhaps look at that as regards what we are discussing today, defense capabilities and industry. And I think that the development of an equally open defense market on both sides of the Atlantic that would support a healthy defense and technological base should be part of these endeavors. Of course, it's a sensitive issue on both sides, and the crisis is both an opportunity and an additional constraint, but it is probably the key to the success. We should exploit industry support and expertise, and ultimately the success and, as I already said, the public support for defense effort will require industry to be fully engaged. Another field for further cooperation is certainly civil-military cooperation in crisis management. you have established a framework for crisis management, and I think it's a positive development that can trigger further work together. We should also increase and facilitate research and technology cooperation in areas such as communication, intelligence surveillance, reconnaissance, maritime surveillance, lift and logistics. By the way, I mentioning those areas, particularly areas which are neither civil or military, and where the comprehensiveness of the approach should be obvious. And we should work again together on these technologies which are most of the time dual use. The same technologies can be used for disaster relief one day and expeditionary military operations the next. So it's really important that we should build on those synergies. We have some assets in the European Union to catalyze these synergies, and it should be one of the things that we should build on in our transatlantic cooperation. And hence, defense transatlantic cooperation, I think, would need something like a roadmap for the new strategic environment and financial circumstances to act as a driving force for our joint endeavors. Well, to conclude, and I don't know how low is the word now, smart defense and pooling and sharing initiative, I think, will help deliver required capability more efficiently, but they are not in themselves enough. I think that the expectations on the relationship are higher on both sides of the pond, but it is expected, again, on both sides to be equitable. We don't call necessarily the same thing equitable, but on both sides there is an expectation that it should benefit to have a more equitable relationship. After all, the core of transatlantic cooperation is about how you, Sam, and I, George, together share responsibilities based on our security, on our common interest and common values. And then I think that even these rather sensitive issues of capabilities and industry technology jobs are very much part of this agenda. Thank you very much.